Do you have something to say?
David Cronenberg, easily my favorite filmmaker of all time. He is largely responsible for turning me, as a teenager, into a lifelong fan of the dark and the strange, of body horror and psychological horror. He has put out 20 feature-length films, 10 of which were based on his own original stories, and the other 10 based on books, short stories, plays. In this video, we're going to talk about 6 of these adaptations. I will tell you about my experience with both the film and the source material, what I liked and didn't like about each one, and I'll give each a rating. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And we'll skip the intro sequence and get right to it, starting with his 9th film, 1988's Dead Ringers, based on the 1977 novel Twins by Barry Wood and Jack Geesland. Now, I first came to this work as a film back when I was an impressionable teenager, and boy was I impressed. I think this might have been the first David Cronenberg movie I'd ever seen, and I was hooked. I loved the darkness and the strangeness of it. Jeremy Irons does a great job playing twins who share women, and they share a passion for gynecology. One of the twins gets addicted to barbiturates, and the severance is quite intense. Love this movie. Decades after first seeing the movie, I decided to check out the book. Now, the book is based on a true story to the extent that there were these respectable twin gynecologists in New York City, and one of the twins was found dead in his Manhattan apartment due to an overdose or complications with barbiturates. Twins was Barry Wood's second book, coming 2 years after his debut, The Killing Gift, but it would be his third book, 1981's The Tribe, that would go on to be his biggest hit. Co-writing credits are given to Jack Geesland, who was a journalist who wrote about this real-life event, this gynecologist who was found dead from an overdose in his Manhattan apartment. And as I understand it, his contribution to this book does not extend beyond that original newspaper article. I think of this as a Barry Wood book. Unfortunately, because this book was based on a true story, I feel like it suffers from trying to stay too close to the truth, trying to stick too closely to what really happened. And it reads like a nonfiction book. I didn't really get the novel experience or the horror experience I was expecting. I didn't really even get a creepy experience, if I'm being honest. I didn't get much out of this book. In fact, one of the things that stood out for me from the movie, or one of the things that stuck in my head years after watching it, was these gynecology instruments that one of the twins creates. He's descending into madness and he creates these grotesque, fantastical tools that look more like works of art. In fact, he is walking around Manhattan and he sees these tools that he created on display at an art gallery. And he is furious. He storms into the art gallery to take back these tools he created. And he's screaming, "These are not works of art. These are medical instruments," right? And that was one of the most striking scenes or visuals of this movie. And it features heavily in the trailer. And it just stuck in my head after all those years. And the publisher, I think, agrees with me, because the edition of Twins that I had these gynecology instruments featured on the cover. And guess what? Those instruments do not figure in the book. In fact, most of what I remember liking about the movie, or what most stood out to me, were things that ended up being additions to the book that David Cronenberg put into his movie. The book Twins didn't do much for me. I was expecting more. I was disappointed. Great movie though. So I am going to give the movie 2 cat emojis. And the book Twins, I will give a shrug emoji. Because Next up, we have David Cronenberg's 8th feature-length film, The Fly, from 1986, which was based on the short story of the same name by George Langlin, which was first published in an issue of Playboy back in 1957 and was made into a movie in 1958. I first came to this work as a movie. In fact, before seeing David Cronenberg's version, I had seen the 1958 version, which I thought was really cool. I mean, I saw it as a child and I thought it was silly and crazy and fun, and I enjoyed it. I saw David Cronenberg's version in the theaters when it came out, and I thought it was great. Great body horror with fantastic performances by Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum. I loved it. It's never been my favorite David Cronenberg movie, but I think it's a great one that works on so many different levels. Scary, creepy, disturbing, emotionally impactful, stunning visuals, practical effects, and set designs. I believed in the love story of the two main characters. When I was a teenager, I believed in love? That's what I put in the script, okay. Decades later, I read the short story the movie was based on, and I was blown away. A story about a man who accidentally turns himself into a fly. That is such a ridiculous, absurd premise. But the execution was spectacular. I was amazed at how much tension the author was able to create, how emotionally invested I was throughout the read, and how scary, legitimately scary, I thought it was. And the writer, he managed to do all of this in about 40 or so pages. It's truly impressive. The short story uses a timeline that is quite different from what the movie uses. In the short story, we have the protagonist, the scientist's wife. She goes to the lab to visit her husband, but she cannot see him. Something has happened. Something bad has happened. So she communicates to her husband through letters that are slipped underneath the door. So what we have is we do not see the events unfolding in real time like we do in the movie. Instead, there is a delay. There is a disconnect between what has happened and when the protagonist, the scientist's wife, when she becomes aware of what happens. And there is another delay between her actions and their results. It is this disconnect, these delays, these gaps in chronology that the story uses to build tension and drive to its ultimate gut punch ending. One of the best endings to a short story that I have ever read. And this is not meant as hyperbole, but I think that The Fly is one of the best, if not the best, sci-fi horror short story ever written. So I'm gonna give the movie a cat emoji, and I'm going to give the short story 2 cats. 2 cats and one very high recommendation. If you haven't read this story, do yourself a favor and check it out. Next up, we have the 12th movie in the DC David Cronenberg catalog, and that is from 1996, Crash, based on the 1973 novel of the same name by J.G. Ballard. I first came to this work as a book. It was my first J.G. Ballard experience, and I was very impressed. The author makes a lot of daring choices in this book about a man who has an erotic fascination with automobile accidents. He brings his wife into his fantasies, and they meet other people who share in their fascination and their curiosity. This is a daring book, a unique book. J.G. Ballard even gives the narrator his own name. He calls the protagonist James Ballard, which is an interesting choice, especially given the subject matter. The story is told in such a callous, cold, mechanical way, devoid of passion. And it's this tone that suits the story so well and makes for a compelling and intriguing read. When reading the book, I could not imagine it as a movie. I knew that the movie existed, but I just couldn't understand how it could be made into a movie. How is this a movie? So a few months after reading the book, I decided to check out David Cronenberg's attempt at putting this strange story on the big screen. In the movie, the setting is moved from London to Los Angeles, which I think works very well for the story. And the movie does try to recapture this cold, callous, passionless tone that the book pulls off so well. And I think that the movie does manage to get a similar kind of tone. However, whereas in the book that cold tone further stimulated the reading experience, I feel like in the movie it made for kind of a boring viewing experience. I was impressed with the movie, with the shots, the scenes, the performances, but it wasn't a very gratifying viewing experience in my opinion. So I'm giving the movie 1 cat emoji because it was well done and it's nice to look at. And I'm giving the book 2 cat emojis. A daring and unique book from one of the great writers of the 20th century. Next up, we have David Cronenberg's 11th movie from 1993, M. Butterfly, based on the play by the same name from David Henry Hwang, published in 1988. Now, I first came to this story by reading the play, and it remains one of the best plays I have ever read, one of my all-time favorites. The play is based on a true story about a French civil servant who gives away state secrets to a Chinese spy who is a man pretending to be a woman, pretending to be in love with this traitor. The play is a brilliant example of the unreliable narrator, except maybe this narrator is reliable to his understanding of events because he has willfully deluded himself, and it is utterly fascinating. I went into the movie a year or two after having read the play, and I did go into the movie with a bit of skepticism because I had heard that it wasn't such a great movie. But I ended up liking it okay. It was slightly underwhelming compared to the experience I'd had with the play, but I thought it was a good movie. The final scene, the final act is excellent. My main contention with the movie is that it stars Jeremy Irons, who plays a French civil servant, and everyone in the movie is speaking French and acting very British. And I feel that all of that clashed with the story they were trying to tell. But I did not have that problem reading the play. So I'm giving the movie a shrug emoji. The final scene is worth it, but the rest of the movie was a bit underwhelming. And I'm giving the play 2 cat emojis, one of the best plays I've ever read. Next up, we have David Cronenberg's 18th film from 2012, Cosmopolis, based on Don DeLillo's book of the same name, published in 2003. I experienced this work first as a novel I didn't really care for, to be honest with you. It's a stylized philosophical condemnation of capitalism. It felt quite dated for 2003. It read like something from the early 90s, like a sanitized American Psycho. I didn't get on with this book. So a few years later, I checked out David Cronenberg's adaptation of this, prompted by a high recommendation from a friend, another David Cronenberg superfan, who told me that Cosmopolis is probably his favorite of all of Cronenberg's movies. I think Cosmopolis would figure quite low in my ranking of his movies. I didn't get on with this movie. I appreciate the experimental nature of this work. I always like when an artist takes chances, when they take risks. It doesn't always work for me, but I'm appreciative of the effort. When I was watching Cosmopolis, I always had the sensation that I was watching actors performing a scene. I never once was I pulled into the story beyond that first superficial layer. So sadly, I'm going to give the movie an emoji of discontent, and I'm gonna give the book an emoji of discontent too. I mean, I hate capitalism just as much as the next guy, right? You know, hammer, sickle, you know, all that. But American Psycho did it better, and the 90s are over. Well, let's move on. And lastly, we have David Cronenberg's 14th film from 2002, Spider, based on the novel of the same name by Patrick McGrath from 1990. I first experienced this work as a movie, and I loved it. Basically, we have Ralph Fiennes, who is playing a schizophrenic who is released from a mental institution into a halfway house back in his old stomping grounds. He goes off his meds so that he can piece together his memories and come to terms with who he is and what he has done. It is a movie that plays out at a slow pace with little dialogue, but Ralph Fiennes delivers a brilliant performance. I love the examination of a diseased mind, and when done well, it's always going to work on me, and here it is done very well. So a few years after seeing the movie, I read the book, and the book and the movie are pretty much beat for beat the same. However, with the book, because of its first person narration, it gives us an intimate reading experience, an intimate immersion into a diseased mind. I loved the movie, entertaining and compelling, interesting, and the book gave me a fascinating and disturbing read. So I'm going to give the movie 1 cat emoji and the book 2 adorable mentally disturbed cats. Have you had any experience with the movies and the books I talked about in this video? What is your favorite David Cronenberg movie? Should I make a ranking video of all 20 of his movies? I should make a ranking video. I'll get on that. What is your favorite J.G. Ballard book? What is your favorite play? Is it M. Butterfly? I always look forward to connecting with you in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.